All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. It is Thursday morning. For me, at least. I know some people are in different parts of the world, and I see Steve all the way from New Zealand, so I know people are in different countries. So, welcome in whatever time it is. Good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So, for those of you who are new, this is the pilot, getting started with Terry White, and today we're going to be getting started with InDesign. So one of my favorite applications for the last 20 years, I've been using InDesign, loving InDesign. InDesign is amazing. If you are joining us for the first time, thank you for joining us so early, at least in some parts of the world. And of course, it's morning time for me here in Atlanta. So we are just trying to give you more content so that you have more things to do in your potential work from home situations or your stay home situations, so that you get something that's creative, constructive, and kind of even purposely distracting you from the news. All right, so with that said, I see people coming in: Bobby, Frederick, Natalie, Victoria was there, I saw earlier, Pro Designer, Arlinda, Renee, welcome, Anita, Christina, Rosemary. Lots of people here today, so just welcome and thank you. If you're watching this on YouTube, or you're watching this on any other platform for that matter, head over to behance.net/live, because that's where I'll be looking at the chat. I see you, Miguel, over there on YouTube, and good morning. But I'm not going to be able to monitor multiple chats, so I'm going to pay attention to the Behance chat. That's where this is pretty much streaming, and we're looking at everything, and so we don't go crazy. Absolutely, Bobby. So with that said, so today we're going to just start from the beginning. How to use InDesign? When would you use InDesign? Because a lot of people just don't even know why they would use InDesign if they're using Photoshop or Illustrator or both. And just really, for the next 55 minutes or so, how to really dive in and get started from scratch. And the best part about InDesign, unlike Photoshop, unlike Illustrator, unlike a lot of tools where there's infinite possibilities, with InDesign, it's really about mastering three things. If you get three things under your belt, then you can do anything in InDesign. It really is that simple. And it's just variations of those three things. Of course, you can get elaborate documents. You can get documents that are hundreds or thousands of pages, but you're just rinsing and repeating. You're really just doing those same three things over and over and over again. All right, so that's what we're going to concentrate on today, is get those three things under your belt. And then once we've done that, like I said, you should be comfortable enough to go off in InDesign and do your own thing. So once again, thanks for joining me live. And if you're not joining me live, you're watching the replay, thanks for watching the replay as well. Those numbers matter to me, and I love the replay. Now, before I get started in InDesign, real quick, just to let you know that this is just the beginning of your day. From an Adobe Live standpoint, we have lots of things scheduled for throughout the day. So kicking things off this morning, 8 a.m. Pacific time, is myself. Getting started with InDesign. Then Jesus Ramirez will come back up with the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge, which I forgot to look at those entries yesterday, so we'll do that in my next segment at Adobe Live, Photo Compositing Part 2. So I did Part 1 yesterday. If you missed that, you can go back and watch that replay. But we'll be doing Part 2. I'll take a half-hour break after this, and then you can watch Ramirez, and then we'll come back and I'll do Photo Compositing. Then after that, the Adobe XD Creative Challenge for those of you who do UX UI design. And for those of you who want to do package design, Paul Traney's going to be up. He's been doing a multi-part series. I think this is his second or third episode this week. So he'll be up at noon Pacific time. And then for a couple hours. And then to finish us off, draw along with Kyle Webster. Kyle Webster is an amazing artist. He will be showing you drawing probably in Photoshop and Fresco and all kinds of painting and drawing tools, so you can get your creative juices flowing. whether you're into technical layout for apps and websites, whether you're into photo compositing, whether you're into graphic design. We kind of got the whole package here for you to stick with us throughout the day. You can tune in and just follow along and learn things, or just chat with the creatives in the community that are just like you, looking for things to keep themselves busy and to stay creative and keep the work flowing. Because this will not last forever. And when this is over, you will want to be able to go back out and say, now I've got some new skills to even take my career further. So without further ado, let's go ahead and switch over to my desktop. I've got InDesign already open, so all I did was just launch it. And I even turned back on. I don't usually use the welcome screen in InDesign, but I wanted to get it back to a state that's pretty much where most of you will be most of the time. And that is starting with this welcome screen, which you can turn this off in the preferences, but it does give you some nice starting points like your recent documents. You can visually see those. You can also start with some sizes here that you can work with. And of course, you can create your own or just go to File and Open. There's also a Learn tab. So if you're really interested in learning more about InDesign, you can learn more about InDesign from there. And that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and say Create New. And let's start with why InDesign. Why wouldn't I just do this in Photoshop? Why wouldn't I just do this in Illustrator? Now, the original reason that I would have told you don't do this in those applications is because back in the day, those applications were single page per document application. So you had a single canvas in Photoshop, you had a single canvas in Illustrator. And if all you wanted to do was lay out a one page or one page, I guess the best way to say it, one artboard kind of document, then Photoshop and Illustrator were just as good as InDesign in that case. But once we got into doing multiple pages in the same document, that's where InDesign really shines. So if you needed to lay out, let's say, even just simply a 4-page brochure, and you would either in Photoshop have to make one giant document that's all 4 pages, or you would have to make 4 different documents for the 4 pages. Now, since then, Photoshop and Illustrator have added artboards. So artboards kind of gives you the ability to have multiple pages, different sizes, different orientations, and you can kind of do it all in one document. And so that 4-page brochure could be done in Photoshop, Illustrator, or in InDesign, and you could get away with it in any one of those applications. But the more artboards you add, the bigger the document is going to be, the slower things are going to be, and the harder it's going to be to manage things. This is where InDesign shines. InDesign doesn't get slower if you have 4 pages or 40 pages or 400 pages. It loves that. It like, oh, give me more pages. I can handle this. No big deal. So InDesign is designed from day one to handle hundreds of pages in a document. People use InDesign to lay out entire magazines, books, legal documents. They lay out annual reports. They lay out anything that's going to really be a long page or long multiple page document. So that's where InDesign shines. It's also faster for working with multiple pages, thanks to things like artboards that make it easier to replicate the same things, that like a logo across the top of the page and page numbering and all that. So InDesign shines when you have more than a few pages. That's what it's for. It also, used to teach it as the way to bring together things that you created in Photoshop or Illustrator. Because you would use Photoshop to create and manage your photos and create composites and all that. You'd use Illustrator to create all your vector art, logos, and things like that. And then you would use InDesign for all the text-heavy things, but bring all those components together inside of an InDesign document. So that's what InDesign really is. All right, so yeah, InDesign did kind of kill Quark Express. It's still there, it's still around. Surprisingly, but yeah, I started way back in the PageMaker days, so that's how long I've been doing page layout. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. We don't need a history lesson right now. Let's go ahead and dive right into why you would use this and how you'd use it. So let's start with creating a document. Now, the thing that's gotten much nicer about InDesign is that because we have integrated Adobe stock, you can just start with a template. You can say, hey, I don't want to do this from scratch. I'm going to go ahead and design a magazine layout, and you've already done the setup for me. I just click on that magazine layout, download it, and I can use it over and over again and get started with that template. It's got all the fonts in it. It's got paragraph styles. It's got everything in it. I just put my content in it, and away I go. And we will do that. We have done that, but we won't do it today because I want to show you how to do it on your own. A template's great. I love templates. They help me get started, but that won't really help you learn InDesign if I just open up a template and we place things. You need to know how to create things on your own. All right, so anyway, we're going to go over to the right-hand side. We're not going to use a template. We're going to go ahead and create a document that's a standard size. Here in the US, it's a letter size document, so 8.5 by 11. But you could go in and choose, if you were in a different country, you could choose A4, A5. You could choose any of those presets as well. And they are, if I were to look at print, for example, and I were to look at all the presets, that's where I would get to those other preset sizes. So you don't even have to type them in manually. They're all here in the presets. So international sizes, tabloid, so forth and so on. They're all here. All right, but anyway, I'm going to do it 8.5 by 11. I'm going to tell it that it's going to be, let's just make up a number. How about 12 pages to get started? And the next thing is I get to choose an orientation. So do I want my 12 pages to be tall? Do I want my 12 pages to be wide? And even if I pick one, let's say I want all of them to be tall except two. I have to pick one or the other, but once I'm in the document, I can rotate individual pages. So I can take the two that need to be wide and make them wide if I need to. You can do that all day long. So, but for the sake of just seeing things on the screen, I am going to make these wide pages. The next thing it's going to ask me, and this is a kind of an important question, and this will just help you determine, or to help InDesign determine how to handle the margins. Facing pages. So facing pages on or off. That means, am I designing something that's individual pages that will turn over, or am I designing something that will open like a book and flip pages? If it's the book thing where there's a left side and a right side, then we want facing pages. If it's just individual front and back pages, we don't need facing pages. So I'm going to say we're going to make a book. Now, the reason you turn on facing pages, and I'll show you what that does, is when facing pages is on, you'll notice down here in the margin area, I have a top, a bottom, and an inside and an outside. When I turn facing pages off, I get that outside and inside turns us into a left and a right. Because there's a left side and a right side. There is no inside margin or outside margin. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, give me facing pages. And that way I can say, make the inside margin, let me turn off the link there, make the inside margin a little bigger so that information won't be in the fold, in where the binding is. That's the whole point of facing pages. So it'll know to make that inside margin bigger on the right side of a left page and bigger on the left side of a right page. That's what that's all about. All right, now this primary text frame. That's a great way to have long documents of text right off the bat. It'll put a text frame across the whole page. I leave that off most of the time because I'm designing the page the way I want it to look. All right, anyway, we're going to turn that off. Next thing is number of columns. These are non-printing, non-binding columns on your page that just help you align things. So my default go-to has always been a 3-column page. You could do a 12-column page. You could do a 7-column page. You could do whatever number of columns you want. And again, they're just there to help you align things. It's really totally up to you for a preference. They don't print. You're not forced. You're not locked into them. So let's say that I wanted to do 5 columns just to mix things up. All right, so now we got 5 columns. We did our margins. This bleed and slug area, people always ask about that, and it's off by default because most people won't use it right away. But let me explain it real quick. Bleed is the amount of space over the size of the page. So we said 8.5 by 11. That means, or we said 11 by 8.5 because we turned it sideways. So that means 11 inches across, 8.5 inches down. That's my page. That's my finished cut piece of paper. But if I were to say that I wanted to print a photo all the way to the edge, well, on a desktop printer, you can probably have a borderless printer that will just do that. But in traditional printing at like an offset printer or a place where you take things that have thousands of pages printed, their printers usually don't print to the edge. They print over the edge. So then they cut the paper down to your 8.5 by 11. So this bleed is saying, I want some extra space so that I can expand my photo, I can expand my graphics over the size of the page so that when it's cut, the image or the colors or the whatever go to the edge of the page. That's what a bleed is. Again, we're going to turn that off for now, but that's what it is. The slug, you usually only have slug on one side. So you could have a slug on the bottom, or on the side. And all this is just creating extra space, again, outside of whatever size your document is. And slugs are traditionally used in advertising agencies, where they might be passing a document around that someone designed, and the slug would have all that information about the document. Who's the author? Who's the copyright of the photos? But basically just information that you can put on the bottom of a page, the right of the page, left of the page, top of the page, wherever you want it, that doesn't print unless you tell it to. And it's usually there for informational purposes for the team working on the document. So that's why I said most people won't use a slug unless you're already in those kind of environments. So that's what bleed and slug are. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off because, again, if I don't explain it, someone's going to ask what those are. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click Create. And when I click Create, that gives me one page. Well, I said give me, 10 or 12 pages. Where are the rest? Well, the rest are scroll down. So InDesign works much like a word processor in the fashion of your pages are all the way down. So if I were to zoom out, we would see them all here. And so I see all my pages at a glance in a view, and I can zoom in on any given page at any given time. And I see hang on, there we go, let's go back. I see my non-printing columns, these little purple lines. They're there just for me to align things up, but they do not print. And you can still pull out ruler guides. So if you need a ruler guide, you can pull out a ruler guide both vertically and horizontally to line things up on individual pages. Okay, now that we got that set, and I said there were really 3 things you need to know. Let's get to those 3 things while we still have time, because I could spend all day on setup, I could spend all day on the interface, I could spend all day on any given thing. Let's get those 3 things out of the way, and then we can answer any questions that if I missed something that you don't have. I miss the smell of ink, the print shop days. I don't miss the smell of ink, but I do miss the process in some cases. All right, let's talk about the 3 things. So what are they? What's thing number 1? Thing number 1, and this is probably the one that will take the most time, so let me get it out of the way. Graphics, frames, dealing with images. Now, InDesign, unlike Photoshop or Illustrator, everything, 2 of the things are in what's called a frame. A frame is simply a container. It's a vector container. Frames can be drawn right in InDesign. They already have frame tools here. You have a set of frames right here. You can even draw a frame with a pen tool. You can draw a frame with a pencil tool. You can draw a frame in Illustrator and bring it in. It's anything that's vector can ultimately become a frame. Text converted to outlines can become a frame. So any vector shape in InDesign can be a frame. The most common frame is a rectangle. But again, that's just common. It doesn't mean that, all my images have to be in a rectangle. Nope, you can make any frame you want, any way you want. All right, so let's say that I want to I want to bring an image in. You have 2 ways to do it. It's going to end up in a frame. It's just you deciding, am I going to make the frame or am I going to let the image create the frame? It's going to be in a frame either way, so it's really up to you. So there's 2 thought processes for this. There's the thought process, I've got a blank page in front of me, and in my head, I know where I want things to kind of go. So for example, I would click the frame tool and I would start dragging out a frame, and I would say, well, I know I want an image to go right here. So I put a placeholder there. That's what frames are if you don't have anything in them just yet. And I kind of know that I want a portrait of the person I'm talking about here. So I create that frame. So I can jump to another page. I can go all the way to the last page. And I can say, you know what? I'm going to put maybe the logo down here. Nice and big. So that's what page layout is, and that's what separates it from like a word processor or anything rudimentary like that, because you're able to create all the pages and lay things out where you want them to be up front. Now, that's the planned design approach. That means in my head, I know where things are going to go. I'm putting the placeholders in, then I'm going to bring the content in as I go. That's one way. The other way is I'll know it when I see it. I'm going to bring stuff in. And when I bring the stuff in, I'll rearrange it and play with it and size it once I get it in. And that's the way a lot of us do it. So there is no right or wrong. A lot of people do it this way. A lot of people do it the way I just described. A lot of people do it both ways. So there is no, oh, you only have to do it one way. All right, so let's say that now that I got these couple of placeholders in, I want to select this one and I want to bring an image into it. How can I get an image into that? Well, multiple ways. I can go in and I can say File. The oldest way of doing this is File, Place. When I choose File, Place, that will bring up my operating system or my place window. I don't know why I can't move. There it is. I was trying to move my place window. Let me get to a spot where I want to go get, I want to go get this content. And looks like my window is frozen, even though my stream looks like it's going. My stream looks like it's going over there. All right, came back. All right, hang on. My production assistant is telling me I came back already. All right, so let's go on. I'm going to go to, had to refresh. Yeah, I see a spinny thing too. Now I'm back. Okay, I see I'm back over there. So hopefully I'm back on your side too. All right, so let's go in and let's find a set of photos to grab in here. And I'm just, hang on, I know you don't see it yet. I'm just getting the window ready. There we go. Okay, let's pull this over. So this is the window that InDesign brought up. It was just on my other screen when I said place. So I can navigate my operating system. I can go find whatever it is I want. I can go to my landscape photos, and I can say, oh, there's a picture of a boathouse that I want, and I can just go ahead and bring that boathouse in. Now, that doesn't look much like a boathouse because the boathouse is hidden. It's bigger than the frame. It's down in the lower right-hand corner. Because when I placed this image, it placed it from the upper left corner down. And if the image was bigger than the frame, well, bigger than the frame. There's not much I can do about that other than size the image. So I can either size the image or size the frame. That is going to be up to you. Most likely you put the frame in there the size you wanted it to be. So therefore, hang on for a minute. Hey, Paul Tranny, are you guys still seeing me? Freezing, can't watch it, spinning again. On my side, it looks good. All right, guys, if you can still hear me, try a refresh of your browser. I'm going to try that right now. Looking over at my connection, everything looks good. But I do see that Behance is spinning. I did a refresh and it came back. Okay, so try that. Okay, so let's see. Repeats and freezing after. Hooray. Yep, back. Okay, I did a refresh. It's back on my side, so hopefully it's back for you guys as well. Okay, so anyway, I've got the image in the frame. And now that I got the image in there, how do I size it down? So InDesign has lots of sizing commands built in. Also, there's a new properties panel in InDesign that will help me with that sizing. So for example, if I were to go to the frame fitting options, there's a menu command for this as well. These are all the different ways of fitting that content in. So the first one is, let me just hover over it, fill frame proportionally, and that's the one I use most of the time. That is the one that I live by, because what that tells InDesign to do is fill up the entire frame with the image, show as much of the image as possible. So let me go ahead and do that, and there's my boathouse. Now that doesn't mean that I'm seeing all of the image. That just means the frame is full and it's scaled it down to where I can see, someone says it's doing it again. I'm sorry folks that the freeze is freezing. But like I said, everything looks streamy on my side. I'm looking over it on the engine that's oh, and now it is freezing over there as well. Deep freeze. Too many people are streaming together. All right. Okay, so all I can say is if it freezes, just try a refresh. That seems to bring it back. Like I said, on my end, everything's green, so it must be just the number of people live streaming on days like today. But everything looks good on my side. So if it does refresh, or like it's doing right now, try refreshing the screen and see if that helps. All right, so with that said, I'm going to continue on because hopefully the replay won't be the freezes, but we'll keep going. All right, so anyway, I've got this image in place. And like I said, that may not be all of it, because all fill frame proportionally does is say, I'm going to fit this into the frame as much as I can, but there still may be some cut off. How can I see what's cut off? Well, you have this circle in the middle. This is the grabber or content grabber. If I hold down, it's letting me see it. If I hold down on it, it's letting me see, oh, I'm cutting off some of the top and the bottom. That's okay. Matter of fact, I can even move it around and say, well, show me more of the bottom because the sky is the sky. And that way I'm still seeing all of it, even though the top's being cut off, but it's filling the frame, which is what I really wanted. All right, so the next thing, let's say that I want to grab the next button. Fill frame, fit content proportionally. What that says is, nope, I'm not going to cut anything off. I'm going to fit the entire image in the frame, even if there's some white space left over or some space left over. Okay, so with that said, it's showing me all of the image, but it's showing me that there's some space left on the right or left and right of it. If that's what you want it, then you would have to adjust the frame accordingly. But at least that way you're not clipping any of your image. So with a photo, clipping is usually not a problem. If it's a logo or something where there's information on the edges, that would be a problem. So in that case, you would want to fit the content proportionally to the frame. All right, and then these last few, fit the content to the frame, which means don't ever do that. That stretches the content. So that just made the boathouse wider. Oh, I can't stand that distortion. Let me undo it. Fit the frame to the content. That you might do after you've gone ahead and said, nope, I need it to be that size, so let me go ahead and do it. And then center the content, and content aware fit is a newer option when you're trying to let InDesign use Adobe Sensei, artificial intelligence, to figure out what the subject is and center it in the frame. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to go in now and go back to the fill frame proportionally, because let me undo it. Let's get it back. Now I'll do the fill frame proportionally. There we go. And now let's say that you wanted to size the content, because once you've got your content in the frame, maybe you want it to now take up 3 columns instead of 2. Well, I could drag this out to 3 columns, but when you resize that way, you're resizing the frame, not the content and the frame. So if I undo that, what if I want to size them both at the same time? And of course, I probably want to do it proportionally so I don't stretch the image again. Then you hold down your Command key on the Mac, PC Control key, and to keep it proportional like you've always done, hold down the Shift key. So that way, I'm scaling both at the same time. I'm not able to stretch it. Notice it will not distort it. And that way I can get the image sized up to that size, as well as the image will now fit inside that frame proportionally, and the image scaled without stretching, so forth and so on. Now, that was one way to bring content in. Let me undo that. What's the other way? Well, let's say I don't select the frame first. Let's say I go to File and Place. That brings up that window over there again. Let me move it over here so you can see it. Let's say I File and Place, and let's say I want to grab this South Africa rowboat, something I took like a decade ago. Now, that gives me the place, we call it the place gun because you can shoot images onto the page, shoot content onto the page. But the place gun is now giving me a preview of what that looks like. And if you just click, that's going to give you a frame with the image in it at 100% of its size. So it's going to be super huge. Let me undo that. Instead of just clicking, I can drag it out, and it already knows what the proportions of the image are. So I don't have to worry about dragging it out and it not keeping the size or stretching it. So I'm not even going to hold down the Shift key. I'm just going to drag it out to these two columns, and InDesign figured it out, filled the frame, made the frame the right aspect ratio, proportions and everything, and placed the content. So that's why a lot of people, instead of just drawing the frames, they just place everything where they want it to go and size it and move it around and do whatever they want. Speaking of moving it around, you have two selection tools. You have the selection and direct selection. The selection tool is for selecting and moving content. So if I decide, well, hey, yeah, this should be over here in between these two columns, this should be up a little bit, and this one should now be over here, that's what your selection tool allows you to do. The direct selection tool, like the grabber hand, selects the content and moves the content and not the frame. So if I undo that, that's what the direct selection is. So if you want to get inside the frame, it's direct selection. If it's the frame itself and the content, then it's the selection tool. All right, so now that we got that, we know how to place both ways. You can also drag and drop. So if I were to go to my CC libraries here, these are some of the things we were playing with yesterday. Remember the squirrel from Photoshop yesterday? So if I want to bring that squirrel in, same thing, brings it into placeholder or place gun. I can start in any column I want or anywhere I want, and then place the content as big as the area I want, and it places that content. So you can drag and drop from a library. You can drag and drop from the operating system. You can drag and drop from pretty much anywhere you can get to the actual file, for example, from Bridge. You can also place and